Hello everyone, this is Ryan from the ProfitTrailer team, also known as RF Radio on the ProfitTrailer support server on Discord as well as elsewhere on the internet. In this video I'm going to be going over another strategy for ProfitTrailer, the EMA and SMA gain strategies. I'm going to cover them both in this video because they are very similar, and the only difference is whether you're using an exponential moving average or a simple moving average to base your strategy on. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at what the EMA and SMA gain strategies are on the Wiki. So we're going to go down here to the bottom of the page, click on Wiki, and this should take us to the ProfitTrailer Wiki page. It's been a little slow today. Alright, so I'm just going to zoom in a bit so we can see what we're looking at here. And scroll down until we go to the buy and sell strategies link down here in the trading submenu. Click that and it will take us over to the buy and sell strategies page. So now we have here the SMA gain and EMA gain listed here in this matrix, about a quarter of the way down, or about a third of the way down, however you look at it. And we do notice that they can be used for normal buy, normal sell, DCA buy, and DCA sell. Each one can be used for both. So let's go ahead and take a look first at SMA gain. And this will give us a quick overview of what we're looking at here. So the buy and sell strategy is true when the current ask and bid price is above a positive buy or sell value or below a negative buy or sell value of the lowest of the two SMA lines specified. Okay, so the the interesting part about this, what it's really saying is that whatever you set for your buy value it's going to determine what the threshold below the lowest of the two SMA lines is specified or above the lowest of the two SMA lines specified or in your chart. So if you set a buy value of say negative 0.5, that means it's going to set its threshold to buy at a 0.5% below the lowest of the two SMA lines on the price chart. So I'll show you what it looks like here in a little bit, but that's really the gist of what we're getting at here. So negative buy or sell value, it's going to sell or buy below the lowest SMA line, and if you have a positive buy or sell price, it's going to buy or sell above the lowest SMA line on your chart. So the valid values are positive or negative decimal values. This is not range bound, so you have unlimited range to use. So just bear in mind though, chart it so you understand what the difference between a 0.5% difference from the SMA line is versus a 1% difference from the SMA line or EMA line, whichever one of these you're using. So that gives a very good visual of what your chart's going to actually look like, where the bot's going to try and buy and sell. So as always with any of these strategies, please look at these on a chart to be absolutely certain you know where the bot is going to be told potentially where to buy or sell. We have the values, some key values right here given as examples. So 1% or 1 would be 1% of the price above the lowest of the two SMA lines. If you say 0, it's going to buy right on the lowest SMA line, and then negative 0.5 is 0.5% of the price below the lowest of the two SMA lines. Now what this is denoting here is when the price gets to that point, it'll buy or sell. Okay, so that's what you're really looking at here. So if the price of the coin gets right on the lowest of the lowest SMA line and you have a buy value of 0, it'll buy it right there if you don't have trailing set. Okay, if you have trailing set, it'll trail at that point, as long as it's going down, I should say. If it's coming down in price and you have a buy value of 0, it should buy right on the lowest SMA line unless you're trailing, then it'll trail down. So just in case there's any confusion there. But if you have it set for, say, negative 0.5, then the price has got to go 0.5% below the price level of that lowest of the two SMA lines before it will buy. Okay, so that's really what this is looking at. The price of the coin relative to the simple moving average of the coin, and it's going to be the lowest of whichever SMA line is lowest at that time. It could be your fast, it could be your slow. So bear in mind, it doesn't care which one it is. So the parameters that affect this are going to be your SMA candle period, SMA fast length, and SMA slow length. So those are set in your indicators config. We will show those here in a little bit. The formula is just as simple. If the buy or sell price is greater than or equal to the lowest SMA times this value here, 1 plus absolute value of the buy or sell value divided by 100, okay, then that's for the positive buy or sell value. Okay, that satisfies, that basically sets where the threshold is for a positive buy or sell value. And then the negative buy or sell value is this one here. It's exactly the opposite. It's if the buy or sell price is less than or equal to the lowest SMA times this long thing here, 1 minus the absolute value of the buy or sell value divided by 100. So there's the two different formulas there for the bot to calculate from. The examples here, I'm not going to go over all of these, but here's a good example here. Default A sell value 0.8. So the sell zone begins at 0.8% of the price above the lowest SMA line, and the bid price must be equal to or greater than this value in order for you to buy it, in order for it to be bought from you if you're selling it. Yeah, that's just how this works here. So it starts at 0.8% of the price above lowest SMA line and goes up from there. So the default A buy value of 0, then buy zone begins on the lowest SMA line. So there you go. There are a couple of ways to visualize SMA gain and EMA gain. It's talking about using the bot indicators on TradingView. We will go to that in a little bit. Before we get into that, I'm just going to show you the EMA gain. This is almost exactly the same. I mean, everything else here is exactly the same. The only difference is you're using an exponential moving average versus a simple moving average. So the curves will look a little bit different. I'll show you both of them on the charts. And if you are unsure as to what a simple moving average is or an exponential moving average is, I highly suggest go and take a look over at investopedia.com and search for exponential moving average and simple moving average, and that'll give you a good basis to understand what these really mean. The basic is the difference between the two. Simple moving average is straight average of the closing price of candles in a period that you specify, like how many candles you specify. It's looking at the straight average of the closing price. If you're looking at EMA gain or an exponential moving average, that is the same thing. It's a moving average, or it's the average of the closing price of the candles in your specified range, but it's weighted towards the later candles. So it's got an algorithm where it calculates the curve differently because it's putting more weight towards the later candles in your sampling period. So now we understand what these are supposed to do with ProfitTrailer. Let's go ahead and take a look at how we set them up in your config files. We're going to start with the pairs. And right now, I'm going to zoom in so we can see what we're doing here. On my default buy settings, right now I'm using EMA gain here as an example because I know EMA gain is a lot more popular than SMA gain, so I'm just going to stick to that for my examples here on my test bot on Bittrex. So my default A buy strategy I have set as EMA gain, just like this. I have my default A buy value. This one is set pretty low, -1 on here, but I'll show you why in a minute because I'm not using a very short candle period on this. My examples on TradingView I'll show you later are going to have a different candle period than what I'm showing you here, so just so you understand where this is coming from. I also have it coupled with RSI, mainly because I find that the EMA gain works a lot better when you couple it with another buy strategy. A couple of my favorites to pair it with would be RSI or stochastic oscillator, or both, to give a better confirmation for my buying. EMA gain can work fairly well on its own as well. I mean, I know of several traders who do use it on its own. It's just if you want it to buy more specifically, then add another buy strategy in there, and that'll narrow down your buying range. I do also set my trailing buy. This is my typical for this on this particular candle period I'm using here, so 0.35. Remember, go ahead and chart this, play with this a little bit so you understand how much it can trail before it'll buy, and make sure that you understand how it's doing what it's doing. For your default sell settings, it's going to be straightforward here, just like your buy strategy. I have EMAGAIN also set for sell. You can use it for selling. And I set my default sell value at 1% above the lowest SMA line, or EMA line, sorry, on this case. So that is where my window starts, at that EMAGAIN line of 1. But also notice I have set gain here of 3%. So it won't even start to look at this until it at least gets a 3% gain on the price from where I bought it at. And then I also have my RSI factored in here as another sell strategy. It has to reach at least 60 on my RSI to do that. This might be a little aggressive. I might lower it a little bit to like 50 if I'm not getting a lot of sells at this level. So there's the possibility there as well. And again, I have my default trailing profit set. You don't have to set your trailing profit the same as your trailing buy. I did here just as an example. Also, bear in mind, this is not a completely tested setting, so if you are going to use the strategy with this setting that you see here, do so at your own risk. I have accepted no responsibility for anything you may do with this particular setup. So this is entirely untested, and this is purely for an example purpose, so you have been warned. Anyways, let's go ahead and look at the DCA config. It's going to be a lot like your pairs config, except that you also have your buy triggers to consider, just like any other strategy. If you've been following along with all the strategy videos, this is a really common recurring theme. Remember that your buy trigger must be satisfied before your buy strategy can be enacted. And I have set here the same way I have it in my pairs config. Notice I have a buy value limit of 0 set here. If you want it to be absolutely certain it's disabled, go ahead and hit a comment right there. I prefer to disable mine, so I'm just going to go ahead and save it there for my DCA. So since if I'm going to, just for my own personal preferences, when I DCA a coin, I typically don't set a buy value limit in there, because especially if I have a negative trending buy value like I do here, I want it to buy as low as possible to get me the best possible average price, as the average is lowered down by my DCA. So I also have RSI factored in here for my sell strategy, or my buy strategy. You notice I have this set pretty darn low. This is very conservative, but again, I've coupled these two together simply for example purposes here, though I probably would do something along these lines as far as coupling another strategy with EMAGAIN just to make it buy a little bit more specifically. And in my default sell settings, you notice I did loosen up the sell value here on my RSI a little bit, but also notice my EMAGAIN, I set my sell value higher here than I did on my pairs, just because if I'm allowing it to DCA and put more into it, I probably want to get a little bit more gain out of it. So I do set that sell value a little bit higher on DCA. And my gain, I have lowered it here, mainly because I want to get the coin out a little bit quicker than I would, say, from pairs. So that's why, in case you're wondering why I changed my values here a little bit, that's a little bit of my thinking here. But again, this is just my own personal preference. You do what you like with these values. You don't have to do what I'm doing here. And again, this is untested, so I'm not certain exactly how well this would work. If you want to test it, by all means go ahead. Just understand you're doing so at your own risk. And again, you have to factor in your trailing profit. So just like your pairs, it's going to buy using the strategy only after the buy trigger has been surpassed, however. And then your sell settings, they will be satisfied, or if these are all satisfied, then your trailing profit will take over from that point, and then it will attempt to sell once that has been satisfied. So now we understand how this works in pairs and config. Let's just quickly look at the indicators to see what we're dealing with. So we have the SMA candle period and fast and slow length, and then your EMA candle period, fast and slow length. So whichever one you're using, it's going to reference either of these two sections for your candle period, fast length, slow length, etc. Right now, I'm using mine a little bit weird. I have 8 and 20 set for my EMA fast and slow. I probably don't want to use it quite that drastically all the time. These are kind of a short. These are kind of short values here. Then shorter than a lot of other people are using, but then again, I am using a 1 hour candle period on this example, so that might be one aspect to consider, that the longer the candle period, it's possible in order to get the particular buys and sell ranges that you want, and then you might have to play with your fast and slow lengths a little bit in order to get that particular buying and selling behavior that you're looking for on particular coins. So just remember, when you chart with the coins that you're going to trade, and look for the best fit for these. If you want to just set it a general, if you just want to set a general strategy, otherwise I would specify them by coin in order to be absolutely certain that I'm getting the performance I want on the coins that I want to trade. So just something to consider. So now we understand how pairs, DCA, and indicators all work. Let's go ahead and take a look at TradingView. We're going to start here on the EMAGAIN strategy, because this is what I showcased on the bot, or on my test bot. So we're looking at ontology on Binance here, and notice I am using 15-minute candles as specified up here in the upper left, and I'm also using a different setup for my EMAGAIN on this chart, mainly for demonstration purposes to show you how this curve appears. My slow EMA that I'm using here is a 34 period, and my fast one is a 13 period. I am also using a buy value here of negative 0.75 and the buy value limit of -2, which basically just guarantees I won't buy below that point. So this is and this is just as an illustration here. I normally don't use a buy value limit, but this is to show you what it would look like on the chart here. So yellow is my threshold for the buy value, the red is the buy value limit, and the blue line is my fast EMA, the purple line being my slow EMA. So as we see here, as the price dips below the threshold here, which this threshold set at negative 0.75% from the lowest EMA line, this being the slow one at this particular point in the middle, as the price of the coin descends past that threshold, you see we have it now satisfying this buy area. If the bot were to buy down in here, you'd have a nice little potential for a gain. If we measure that out, say that bought just a little bit below, and it sold somewhere up here, we'd have a potential for around a 2% gain on this particular area here. And say you could realize that inside of 3 hours using this strategy. So that would have been one particular possible buy and sell zone that you could have. Another one would be right here, if it were to buy just a little bit below the threshold and sell somewhere up here. We're looking in about 2.5 hours. You could realize a 2.5 to 2.9% gain quite handily there too. So there's a one way to do a quick turn with this strategy, which is actually very commonly used, I've noticed. Throughout the community, there's a lot of people using EMAGAIN. They're using it for what's called scalping, or essentially doing a very short trade, so it buys and sells very quickly, and for very small amounts, anywhere from 0.5% to 2% gain. That would be considered scalping. Some people would say that I'm a little off base, and scalping is really between 0.5% and 1%, but I consider anything below 3% really to be considered scalping, because I tend to look for a higher gain over a longer period of time. So it's all really in what you would consider to be a short profit margin or a very small profit margin. Now, doing trades like this lots and lots of times over and over, yes, you can trade very quickly. You can gain a decent profit fairly quickly, but it also opens you up to considerable risk in the market. So just bear in mind when you're using the short trading actions that you're staying aware of what the market conditions are doing, because you can get yourself into the wrong side of a trade quite easily if the market suddenly drops while you're expecting it to go up. So just be aware of the larger trend when you're using these shorter trading cycles like this. That's just my personal opinion. So if you're looking at this chart here, we're looking at the EMAGAIN curve. So we see a nice pretty tight curves here, staying fairly close to the price action of the chart. Now let's go take a look here at the SMA gain equivalent. You notice there is no change in the there's no change in the candles here or the positions, but look at the curve. That's EMA gain, SMA gain. So we're looking at the simple moving averages here and how it relates to the strategy that we're using. And you'll notice the curves are a little bit more gradual on SMA gain. They tend to vary more widely than they do on the EMA because the exponential moving average tends to keep things a little tighter between the two EMAs that we're using. This one tends to range all over the place by comparison, so it does look a little more a little less precise, honestly. That's how I look at it. But you do see that the buy zones and sell zones stay relatively close to each other. You see there are a few less buy zones on this particular setup than there are on the EMA gain setup, but all in all, you get very similar buy ranges. It can give you a little bit less opportunities compared to EMA gain in some cases, but at the same time you can also get more in other areas than what you could with EMA gain. So there is a little bit of a trade-off and things to consider with it. Like EMA gain, I would consider pairing this with another strategy just to be a little more specific in the buys to help get you into that better buying position. But again, like EMA gain, SMA gain can be used to buy above the lowest of the two SMAs. Now, a word of caution when you're using the positive buy value on these. If you are going to use positive buy value on these, I would recommend not using trailing and setting a buy limit, a buy value limit. So it buys only at a certain percentage above that lowest of the two SMAs, and then if it goes above that, okay, you got to let it go, because then you might be buying way near the peak. And you don't want to do that if you wanted to try and buy a little bit lower and sell near a peak. So just keep that in mind if you're using the positive buy value for this, trailing off, and make sure you use a buy value limit. That's about all I can say on that. And the same goes for EMA gain. Trailing buy was never really intended to be ranging upward on these. It tends to, it basically trails downward. That's where it is intended to work. Because it relies on the pullback coming up for it to buy. So having it go upward, it's actually not going to work for you. So just keep that in mind. So that's about all I have there for the EMA and SMA gains on their own. Let's go ahead. I'm going to show you what this looks like a little bit more. If I wanted to say pair one of these with stochastic oscillator. So you can't really add stochastic oscillator in with the strategy on its same chart, but you can pair it alongside it right here. Let me quickly adjust this so it's not using the smoothing that doesn't quite work for the bot. Okay, so this is what it actually would look like, what the bot looks at when it's taking a look at the charts. So you see here, if you have a stochastic oscillator value of, say, 20 as your threshold for buying in conjunction with the negative 0.75 here on this particular coin on Ontology on Binance, you'll notice they do line up fairly nicely right here, and this could be a very possible buy zone if it goes down into the oversold range like it did here. And then as it pops back up, you might have to be a little more conservative on your sell value here if you wanted to sell on this cycle. As you're going up in the price here, it gets up above 60 on your stochastic oscillator, and you have about a 2% gain right there in price. It could be a possible sell area. So that's just illustrating how these overlap a little bit. You get these buy zones like this here. It doesn't quite get below 20 on the stochastic oscillator, so you might have to gauge it over its cycle whether or not you want to use that as a typical threshold, or if you want to raise it up a little bit, maybe make it 25 as your possible buy value for your stochastic oscillator. If you were to do that and buy in this area here, because notice it did dip well below the 0.75 threshold, maybe if you bought right around the 25 mark with stochastic oscillator, could put the ballpark right about here. if we were to measure that, I just let it coast all the way up near this peak and sell somewhere around a sell value on Stoke as like at 85 or something like that. Or if we set our buying or selling threshold to 80 and a gain of at least 5%, you could easily make that with this particular cycle here. It would just take about 5 hours on something like this. So using 15-minute candles, you can see that sometimes you wait a few hours to make a good sale, but sometimes it's better to be a little bit patient with this and let them go for the longer profits than quick turn all the time. Just something to also consider. If you like turning coins over really quick, well, then you might want to use 5-minute candles to check it out, or to check the coin against the indicators to see what it's doing. So that's about all I have now here on the EMA and SMA gain. If you like what you see here on the channel, go ahead and hit that like button down below. Please consider subscribing to the channel, and if you want to get updates on when we post new videos and other content, please go ahead and hit that little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. As always, stay safe, happy trading, and I will see you on the next video where we will go into the EMA and SMA cross strategies. If you need any help with your ProfitTrailer client, please consult the wiki at wiki.profittrailer.com, and if you still have more questions, don't hesitate to join us over on the Discord support server following the link on your screen.